Everybody to this camp meeting. Let's open with a word of prayer. Holy God, we thank you that we are allowed to be alive at this time in Earth's history. We know that people's hearts are failing as they wonder what the future brings. And even though we don't know everything, we believe that you are in control and that we can have confidence that you know the end from the beginning, that you're in control. We ask that you would bless us and guide us in Jesus' name. Amen. It's been 2 weeks since we met together. And I hope by now everybody has been able to watch the presentations that were done in Fiji. I'm not trying to suggest any prophetic significance, but it seemed interesting to me that Elder Terry's study on the Sunday law was opened up in Fiji last year. And I think the studies that were done at this last camp meeting will prove to be the beginning of answering people's questions. I want to talk about a different subject today. It's the subject of libertarianism. I know that both I and other speakers have addressed this subject many times in the past. And teachers have commented on both the United States and other places in the world when they deal with the subject of libertarianism because all of us know, I think, what libertarianism is. So I'll give a very simple definition. Because it's so long, I'm just going to put LIB as we go through the study. It's a political philosophy. Does anybody want to give a different view or understanding of what libertarianism is, separate to, okay? Separate to being a political philosophy? Or is everybody comfortable with that definition? Yeah. Okay. Yes, we had some private communication here, so I muted myself. So we have about 12, 13 people here, and nobody has commented. So I assume everybody here is comfortable with that definition. It's only a partial definition, of course. So it's something to do with politics. And what would we say about this political philosophy? What people's thoughts about what kind of philosophy this is? Brendan?
It exercises extreme freedom.
So Brendan said it exercises extreme freedom. So does that mean it's radical?
I don't know about radical. It just considers freedom above all. That's
so Brendan said he doesn't know if it means radical freedom, but it deals with freedom in an extreme sense. Is that what you said? Okay. Anyone else? Josephine? Ultra far right. All right, ultra far right.
It believes in small.
1 second. John, go ahead.
It believes in small government.
Small government. Anyone else? Extreme freedom. It's connected to the ultra far right, and it's has this idea of small government. You want to say something else? No? Brendan?
it has a positive outlook for society. It looks and says, it's, I don't know how to say it. It thinks eventually society will do the right thing.
I'm going to put so it's has a positive outlook. I'm going to say has confidence in humanity. Is that? Okay. And do you have confidence in humanity?
Depends.
So I asked the question if Brendan has confidence in humanity, and he said it depends. Because I think they would say it depends as well. So are you extreme?
I'm not sure.
Okay, Brennan said he's not sure if he's extreme. So I picked up on the word that he used, which was extreme. I asked if that was radical, because most people think anyone who's a radicalist is an extremist. And we've discussed that several times in presentations. Okay, so I'll give a bit of a definition. Libertarianism is a political philosophy that holds freedom and liberty as primary values. So I don't know if you can see that in these four phrases. Holds freedom and liberty as primary values. So who disagrees with that? Who disagrees with that thought that that you would want to hold freedom and liberty as primary values? Because these definitions sound pretty bad, the first four that I got. And I'm wondering if you disagree with holds freedom and liberty as of primary value, they're the most important thing. Rachel.
It depends on who's holding those values to who it applies to.
So it depends on who holds those values. And are you saying how they would apply it? You didn't quite say it that way.
If I value freedom and liberty.
So if Rachel values freedom and liberty, for whom? For your, so if she were valuing freedom and liberty for herself,
I'm going to then allow Josephine to have those same freedoms and liberties.
so someone who holds on to a libertarian perspective, who wants freedom and liberty for themselves, the question that I think you asked, will you afford those same rights to your neighbor? So when we think about libertarianism, what's the answer to that? Yes or no? What do you think, Rachel? You don't think? So Rachel says people don't afford the same rights to others. If I ask you what do you want out of life, the most important things that you want?
People to have same rights as each other.
So she said people to have the same rights as each other. But it has to start with what you want. So if everybody was a slave, you wouldn't want that, I presume. And you'd all have the same rights. So it's a bit more than having equality. It begins with what you actually want. As you review your life and you think of all the twists and turns that have happened, and if you reflect on the value of your life, and either if you make an assessment of where you are today, or if you said, I wonder if I could do this all over again. You can, that's fine, go ahead. So maybe if we could do it all over again, what would we want that would define our lives as having value or meaning? Okay, so I'll ask someone else. I'll come back to Rachel in a moment. What do you want out of life? What's important to you? Yep.
Yes.
So Rachel said happiness. So the question is, what is important to you? And she said happiness. And what would make you happy? Whatever you want to say.
The enjoyment of life free from stress.
Stress-free life. Mm-hmm.
Healthy body and mind,
Health.
financially,
Money.
with friends and family,
Relationships. Relationships that are positive.
and
We can stop there. Anyone else? Ray.
Making a contribution or a difference, like
I'm going to put the word worthwhile. Making a difference. Mm-hmm.
so just like going to work and your boss comes on and says, "Oh, you did a really good job today." You know, that's what,
Okay. So affirmation at work, as an example, that you feel that you're making a difference. Affirmation means receiving praise. Anyone else? Josephine.
Being able to communicate that fear of being understood.
Not living in fear. That's what you value, yeah? Not living in fear. Anyone else?
Being able to help others that I need.
Helping people. Okay, so I'll stop there if no one's got anything else. If we go back to we're always USA centric in all of our theology and ideology, I guess. So if I went back to I call them the framers, what would so the framers are the people who construct things, if you like, builders. So those who built America, and we all know why they built America, why it was constructed, if I can say it that way. What did they think that was important? We're talking about libertarianism, so political philosophy. I would just want to add, I think it's a little bit more than just a political philosophy, to be honest. I think it's quite a bit more than that. But that's what we've said. We had four, I call them definitions or examples of this philosophy, and they're all pretty negative. Maybe the last one we might argue with. But I think the way Brendan was portraying the last one, it's like pie in the sky craziness. And then I gave the not a dictionary definition, then I gave a definition that I got, which sounded quite positive. And then I asked, what do you think is important for you? And we got all these positive things. And then I asked the framers, what did they say? What was important for them? John?
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or property.
Life, liberty, and we'll call it property. And they called it happiness, the pursuit of happiness. Is that how they phrase it?
I think the English version is property.
So John has said that the framers speak about life, liberty, and he said the pursuit or the striving for property. In the framers' wording, they use the word pursuit of happiness. I think he said that they borrowed this idea from the English. Which spoke about property. Have I summarized that okay? Yep. Okay, so that's what the framers wanted. They wanted life, liberty, and happiness. Or property, because property makes you happy. What does life mean? When they said life, what do they mean by that? Because they're all alive. They don't mean that.
The government arbitrarily.
1 second. Sorry, Chris?
The government couldn't take it arbitrarily.
So the government can't take my life. So government cannot take, and I assume that means kill. Let's soften that. Some other thoughts, because they could do a lot less than kill you.
The government's supposed to keep you safe.
Okay.
So
Go ahead, John.
the
Yeah.
the government's supposed to keep you safe.
So I'm going to use the sentence cannot. So let's think of some negative things besides killing you. Second. Go ahead.
Slavery.
Slavery. Brendan?
Force.
Force. Molly said slavery. I'm going to use the word control. So if you finish it off, Chris. The government cannot do what? Just finish the sentence. Any one word.
So without process, without good reason.
Without, you said without process. Okay, so we'll use law. Because if you use process, then we would have said probably due process, which is similar to law. So the government cannot force control without law. Does everybody agree with that definition? Anybody disagree? Graham, you disagree? Okay. Okay, so Graham's going to is going to comment on this.
For writing rules.
So the framers are writing law.
To move away from what they've come from.
James, there's a seat here if you want. To move away from where they came from.
And where they came from had laws to take, enforce, and control.
And the place that they came from actually had laws that forced, controlled, and took your life. Okay. So if we can all see that sentence there, we can see that the framers didn't actually want that. They want a lot more. Because the government cannot take, force, or control you. If I take the word without and use the word with, so turn it completely opposite and say with bad laws. Is that what you were suggesting? Yeah. So this is about the people saying to the government, you cannot create bad laws that harm us. And all of us know the historical context of what they were doing. And why they were doing that. Because this was a colony. And even though we may not view it this way, it borders on slavery. Because if you were to look at the definition of slavery, it would meet the original sentence. Because slavery was legal, but it didn't give people, if we go with this definition, it didn't give them life. We might say they didn't have a life. Anyone else, what they think life means?
Right.
Molly?
Right.
Rights. So Molly said rights. Anyone else? Josephine said God-given rights. Are there any other types? Is there another type of right besides God-given ones? I only asked that because if they weren't God-given, they would be wrongs. They wouldn't be rights. It's just that people add that word God-given because they don't trust people to come up with good rights. They say, oh, you invented that right. And it's interesting that we still use God-given, because if you speak to most of your peers outside of the camp, or your Adventist friends, when you talk about rights, what are they saying about the rights that you speak about? They say you invented them, or they're atheistic. They're not God-given. So I want us to really think about that when we use that phrase. Because to say God-given means they're not obvious. I would suggest. So if I say, I think every human should have equal rights, most of your friends would say, that's crazy, we don't believe in that. Because they don't think God affords that to people. So we invented that. So when we fall into the mindset of using the phrase God-given, I think we come onto their platform instead of remaining on our own. One of the things that the framers do, they didn't do it in this phrase. They use the concept, I think maybe even the word, of inherent or natural. So they talk about if it's inherent or natural, I'm going to say it's obvious that human beings have obvious rights. And if they were so obvious, what don't you need if they're obvious? John? You don't need law, Molly? You don't need any government, Brendan? I was going to say you don't need God. If it's obvious, you don't need God. You don't need any God-given rights if it's obvious. The fact that you're a human being and you say, I know what my rights are, we would have to say to whatever, half the world that they don't even know what rights are. Because they're atheists. And the remaining 50%, 99.999% of them, worship whom? We'll go with Castor and Pollux, which is a fake god. So their rights aren't based upon anything either. So we'd get to the place we're the only people that can define human rights. I'm pretty sure none of you believe that. Especially because you'll say, oh, the world taught us everything we knew. Which is the worshippers of Castor and Pollux. And all those atheists who've got nothing to look forward to. And they seem to know a bit more about human rights than we did. So it might sound like a small point, but I think when we speak about the subject of libertarianism, it becomes significant. Because what do you end up doing? Josephine? What do you end up doing when you talk about rights? Go ahead. Exert your rights. I'm just summarizing what we said in the last few minutes. Molly?
You turn away from God.
You do what?
Get rid of God.
Molly says you get rid of God. And most people, most of us, are afraid to do that. Or we think it's wrong in some shape or form. All I want to suggest is if these are common rights, then you don't need God's help to work them out. As soon as you need God's help to work out what your rights are, I want to suggest you destroy something. What's the thing that you destroy if you need God's help to work out rights? Brendan?
Liberty.
Brendan said liberty. You end up destroying liberty if you need God to work out rights for you. So Rachel said at the beginning, when I asked her, what does she want? She said, equality for everybody. Something like that. If you start talking about God-given rights, you'll quickly come foul of that ideal. And Brendan just expressed it as liberty. We could also express it as the golden rule. You destroy the golden rule if you have God-given rights. Why would that happen? So you've said, does it mean you don't have a choice? Go ahead. Okay, so Josephine says you have a choice. Right?
So if you need God's help to work out what your rights are,
If you need God's help to work out what your rights are,
then
what?
what
Go ahead.
and understanding your rights comes with understanding what you want out of life.
Understanding your rights comes from what you want out of life.
Then you're basically asking God to tell you what you want out of life.
Then you end up basically saying that, God, you need to tell me what I need to get out of life. And Castor and Pollux will tell you one thing. Jesus will tell you another thing. So there are no rights. They're all defined by God, which ends up being not human rights, God's rights. Or we might call them religious rights. Or we might call them the far right. Okay, Brendan, you want to say something?
Oh, I was gonna
Go ahead.
I was gonna say that it's
That's what you want to say?
similar to what you said. It comes down to the person's view of God, and they would enforce those rights.
So the reason it becomes dangerous, wrong, is because people's views of God would mold and shape their definition of what a person's rights are. And even though we're all in the movement, we've all got different ideas of who God is. God's really nice. God has bad days, perhaps. Gets angry with us. Laughs when we make mistakes and get tripped up. God definitely mocks us. We know that. So I just want us to see that introducing the idea of God-given rights can be problematic. Now, the framers do use God in quite liberally in their writings. And what God is that? Christian God. I mean, that's what it's a Christian God. And you see how that's now been weaponized today. Because we have to follow the Christian God. We, the people of the United States. And that means curtailing other people's rights who don't see things the same way. Okay, anyone else about life? Liberty. What's liberty? Not said much, Catherine, yet. Freedom? In your dictionaries if you want, I don't mind. So little to no interference. I'm just going to say that's freedom still. So we're pulling out our dictionaries now. Looking for just a simple definition if there's anything beyond freedom. Nothing? Okay. Okay. So we had freedom and it's, I'm going to say free from control. Is that simple enough? Does that work?
Yeah.
Free from control.
And then freedom is the power or right to act, speak, or think as you want to.
Okay, so we had a definition of freedom, but I'm going to leave freedom as a definition of liberty. And we're going to say it's more accurately that you're free from control. All good? So is that a good thing or a bad thing? To be free from control. Good or bad?
Depends.
How can it depend? Does it depend if you're a lizard or a human? Because if you're a human, it's your innate right, isn't it? Okay, I'll do it a different way. Who doesn't want liberty here? Put your hands up if you don't want liberty. No one put their hand up. Is that because you're all nice? Because all the bad people would want liberty as well. Josephine? Okay, so we can have liberty without causing harm. But I'm just asking you what liberty means and if you'd want it.
Free from law.
John said free from law. So you could make it free from law, but the definition is free from control. And are you saying control is law? Is that what you mean? So do you think that's good or bad?
Well, if you go back to Satan, it was bad. To Lucifer in heaven, I'm talking about.
So John said if you go back to Lucifer, it was bad. But I'm asking you. Would you like liberty?
I like liberty, but I think there's got to be some sort of restriction.
So John said he likes liberty, but he doesn't want full liberty.
Have full liberty.
Sorry?
The Garden of Eden, they didn't have full liberty.
So John referred us back to the Garden of Eden. I was asking what you want. And you're saying you'd like to be under some kind of control
I think so.
because you're out of control? Can't control yourself? So you need someone to control you?
I guess I'm not talking as an individual, but as a community, I think.
So John says not as an individual, but as a community. but communities start with individuals. And for you, would you want to be under some kind of control?
You know, it depends what that control is.
John said it depends. Any control. Do you want people or beings or anybody to control you?
No.
So the answer is no, you won't. Because to say yes means that you think you're out of control. And if you've got a life that's out of control, I think you fall foul of number one. Just in the sense that life isn't nice.
Do I think life isn't nice?
If you're out of control, would you think life was good for you?
Probably not.
See, yeah, probably not. If you overeat, if you don't sleep, if you overwork, you end up finding that life isn't,
Pleasurable.
life is not pleasurable. So if you're in control, then you would want liberty, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Rachel. Rachel, who you want to ask the question to? Go ahead, or try.
When I think of the law, I think other words of, there's rules and boundaries that help us.
So Rachel says, when we think about control or law, there are boundaries. So you have a question, or was that the?
You say instead of.
So we can use the word boundary or control or law or restrictions. Rachel?
Does that get back to good law or bad law?
So John said, does it make a difference if it's good or bad laws? So my question to you, Rachel, do you want someone controlling you? Putting boundaries of what you can and cannot do? You don't want that. Even if they're good ones. No? So Rachel says no. I think all of us, when we think about what we want out of life, none of us want control. We all want liberty. Or freedom. Or not someone telling us how to lead our lives. So, property. What's this one? What is this? What does this mean, property?
The ability to own things.
Chris?
The ability to own things.
The ability to own. Someone say something? Ownership? Yep, so I've got to own. Wealth. I'm just going to put to own things. So what kind of things? So is wealth money or property? Things.
But think, well, yeah, if you're gonna say things and it's
So it's money and things, material things. Anything else?
Then
Land. I've got that's material things.
Slave.
To own slaves. That's material things, if you wanted to do that.
Ideas.
Ideas.
Intellectual.
Intellectual rights, intellectual property rights. Education. So, should there be a limit to this? Who wants to be limited by how much wealth you have? However you define wealth, we've given some ideas here. Should it be limited? Would you want any of these to be limited? Brendan's not sure.
Some yes, some no.
Oh, Brendan said some things yes and some things no. Tell me which one you don't want a lot of. You don't want a lot of money?
I don't think it's a great idea to have an unrestrained
So Brendan said he doesn't think it's a good idea to own lots of things.
just saying unrestrained at the expense of others.
So Brendan would prefer to not have liberty
Why?
and have someone control how many things he can get. Because you don't believe it's your innate right. I was about to say God-given right then. So you don't think it's your innate right to get as much stuff as you can?
I'm just going to say sure.
Why does it? So he said sure because he's forced by the logic to say sure. He has to agree. What I want to ask you is, why do you feel it's wrong?
Because there's
One
so
sec.
much,
There's something within you, your moral compass, or whatever, saying
so
it's
much
wrong.
suffering.
Okay.
There's so much suffering.
So
You can't.
Brenda's answer is there's so much suffering. He doesn't want to earn lots of money because that will help. That will alleviate suffering somehow. We could go through that logic, but you'll see that it doesn't work.
Right. Be like Musk.
I won't repeat that. It's unrepeatable. They heard you. There's nothing in here that says you can't give all your money away. But we people think there's something wrong with having lots of things. And I wanted to know why you think it's wrong.
Program.
Sorry?
Programming.
You're programmed. Rachel?
Sounds greed.
Feels greedy.
Text in the Bible,
John?
it's harder for a rich man to enter into heaven than a camel through the eye of a needle.
It's harder for a rich person to enter into the kingdom of heaven than a camel to go through the eye of a needle. I said that to someone the other day, interestingly enough. Let's just do a little detour. You said rich and camels and needles and threads. Yeah. Sorry, Joseph. I was going to go in a different direction, if you bear with me. Brendan, who are the richest people in the world? Let's name a couple.
Bezos,
Sorry?
Jeff Bezos.
Jeff Bezos. Elon Musk.
They're all tech people.
Okay, so we're all literal people. So we always get trapped into literalism. So I'll give you another go. Who are the richest people?
People in the movement.
Okay, so I say this with great respect. So Elder Terry is one of the richest people around. If you're going to go with your definition. Okay. Camels. So you have to do one of those FFA techniques. I say that respectfully. You have to go into the root word, twist it around a little bit, and you come out of all of that. You just compare and contrast, by the way. You can just do it that way. Rich people and it's the poor. Or the burden bearers, because that's what camels are, the ones who bear the burdens. And we all know what needles and threads are used for. Lines. Or line upon line. So who wants to have a go at that parable then? I'll start you off. It's harder go on then. It's harder. Who wants to finish it off? Harder?
Understand parables than.
Oh, no, no. It's harder for me. It's harder for Parminder
To get to heaven.
to be saved than it is for someone outside the movement to understand line upon line. It's easier for them to understand line upon line than it is for me to get to heaven. That was just a detour. Courtesy of John. Thank you, John. I like that. Okay, back to our subject. So the framers wanted life, liberty, and lots of property. So people feel this guilt of amassing things. Amassing means gathering lots of things. And what's the fear about having all of this stuff? What are you afraid of? So I think people said they feel guilty because of the poor.
Distraction.
It's a distraction.
Well,
So having lots of money is a distraction to you. We live in very different worlds. You find it a distraction if you had 6 figures, 7 figures in your bank?
it's not that. It's
So it's not
not the money in the bank.
okay. It's not money in the bank that's the distraction. What's the distraction?
Effort, time, and
The time and the effort
to
to
accumulate that. It's. I find it not necessary.
okay. So Brendan says it's not necessary to spend all the time that he has accumulating things. Yeah.
It takes a lot of energy.
So I understood the point you're making, but this is about your right to do so.
So
Anyone want to say something?
Yeah.
Go ahead. So Catherine said being poor is distracting. You want to say anything more? So I want to just address this issue of poverty. How should poverty be dealt with? So let's go to God's plan of how poverty should be managed. What's the solution that God offers? Molly says tithing. So there are 2 types of tithe. I think we all know that. We'll call it a social and a religious. It deals with spiritual poverty and physical poverty. So the reason that there's poverty is not because there's too many rich people grabbing things. It's because not everybody pays their fair share. People don't pay a faithful tithe, which when you do all the maths, doesn't mean that everybody has the same wealth. But what it does mean is that you don't have people who are in abject poverty. It eradicates slavery. I think the most important thing it does, it offers opportunity. Gives people an opportunity to better themselves. We know that Babylon, the world, I say that in a nice way, have kindly taken number 1 off of our hands. So all that's been co-opted to them, to the government. They take over the social aspect of your tithe, which is good because we're no longer able to define liberty and all these other freedoms that people want. Government does it for us. Which leads us to the religious tithe, which we should all be paying, and we don't. And that's why there's so much poverty, religious poverty. Okay, so that was my plug to say we should all be paying tithe, and we don't. It's not because we've got lots of rich people in our movement. That's not what the problem is. Our problem is people don't pay tithe. And so that's why great swathes of the movement are in poverty. And they'll never get out of that poverty until everybody operates properly. Coming back to the subject of the framers, John took us away from happiness and took us to property. And he took us to the English. And he took us to, he didn't mention the person's name, to a philosopher who, I guess we would call it in the Enlightenment, began to think about this subject of what people wanted. And we all know that person's name? John Locke. Yep. Is it? I think it's got an E at the end. Is that right? Yeah. So that was John Locke. So, was John Locke a libertarian? Did he believe in libertarianism? Brendan says no. You said no?
Don't think he was.
Okay. Anyone else? Got any thoughts? So did he want life, liberty, and the pursuit of property? Yeah. And clearly those aren't the definitions of, even though the middle word is liberty, he's not a libertarian.
I'll say yes.
Okay, you're saying yes. I didn't mean to bully you into saying yes.
No.
Libertarianism is taken on a dirty meaning nowadays. I get that. And, you know, we talk about all of these ideas, small government, we don't really trust humans. Ultra far right, extreme freedom, etc. So I know it has a very negative image now. So who here would classify themselves as a libertarian? So one person, I won't name the names. I don't want to name them. We had one person said yes.
Probably like it appears that we're all libertarian.
So Brendan says it appears that he might be more libertarian than he thought. Okay, so let's go to a conservative author. So we can get a bit of a reality check. So for the translators, I'm going to post this on the forum. So you tell me who the author is. The Law of Love. I'll do sentence by sentence. Hopefully, that will give you enough time to search it out and translate. No, I'll do the whole paragraph, and it'll give the translators a chance to search out the text. Everybody should have that available. The law of love, being the foundation of the government of God, the happiness of all created beings, depending upon their perfect accord with the great principles of righteousness. God desires from all his creatures the service of love, homage that springs from an intelligent appreciation of his character. He takes no pleasure. I can hear some music, don't know whose that was. He takes no pleasure in forced allegiance, and to all he grants freedom of will, that they may render him voluntary service. So who was that? Oh, wait, they're going to translate first, sorry. So I've just titled this section, The Law of Love. And who was the author? Like we don't know. And do you know what book? Great Controversy. Put the page because you'll all want that. Of course. And that's chapter 29, The Origins of Evil, or The Origin of Evil. So for a conservative author, does that sound pretty liberal? It did to me when I read it, to be honest. What does it say? It contrasts the law of love, and it contrasts that against what? So it's going to, yeah, contrast it, yeah. It's going to be contrasted or compared to what? I'm just going to read it for the people here again. You don't have to reread it. The law of love, being the foundation of the government of God, the happiness of all created beings, depending upon their perfect accord with its great principles of righteousness. God desires from all his creatures the service of love, homage that springs from an intelligent appreciation of his character, takes no pleasure in a forced allegiance, and to all he grants freedom of will, that they may render him voluntary service. So what's the law of love being contrasted against? Chris?
Forced allegiance.
False allegiance. Someone said that. Yeah, false allegiance. You've got to speak a little bit louder. Thank you. So forced. I want to use the word obedience as opposed to allegiance. That's okay. So forced obedience. The foundation of God's government is contrary to the idea of forced obedience. Are we okay with that? And when we talk about forced obedience, how would you define what forced obedience is? What's been forced upon you? I know it's obedience, but choice.
Choice.
So forced obedience is a choice. We're not looking at the opposite of that. We're looking at what that would be.
Yeah, because
Because if you're forced, there's no choice, is there?
or the alternative is
Go ahead.
the alternative is so bad that it's not a viable option.
So the alternative is not a viable option. Where does that come in with the idea of forced obedience?
Coercive. It's coercive.
Okay, coercion. Anyone else?
Law, isn't it?
It's law, isn't it? Isn't it just? I was gonna say, duh. It's law. Isn't that? You got to say duh. Not really. Not really. I don't know what that translates to. So forced obedience means you keep the law. Because the definition of law is do it or consequences, which is control. We all agreed, I hope, when we went to this idea of control and we had law, we'll take the question mark out because it is law. But we agreed that it's not bad law. And neither is it good law. It's all law. No one wants to be controlled by law. And if you thought that was weird or anti-Christian in some way, isn't that exactly what we've just read? That the law of love stands in opposition to forced obedience. Now, we're not discussing what happens in a complex situation. I mean, we'll just say complex situation. What we're discussing is the foundation of God's government. And it seems like that the foundation of God's government is antagonistic towards forced obedience. And what God really wants is freedom of will. That means you can do what you want. And voluntary service, not being a servant or a slave. That's what I read in this foundation of God's government. And it sounds to me really similar to what John Locke was teaching way back then. That he'd worked out that what people want is a life that's free from control. And we just read that in the Spirit Prophecy passage. They want liberty, which again is freedom from control, which is what we just read in the Spirit Prophecy quote. And all we didn't pick up was this idea of property. So we've come to the end of the class. And I want to be clear that I'm not trying to undermine or reinvent all the work that Elder Tess did, speaking about libertarianism and its dangers today. So I'm not trying to attack any of those things that were taught. Neither am I trying to attack anybody, any people out there. What I want us to try to consider is where our values are or where our moral compass is. What do we think is right and wrong for ourselves? We know that there are constraints. But if I were to ask you deep down, what are you? We all would automatically say we're not libertarians because they're really bad people, bad actors. We'd never go down that path. And I wanted us to explore the path that God wants us to take. That's the Great Controversy quote. And the path that you want to take, which sounds extremely libertarian when you think about it. So we'll stop there. We'll have a think about it. And we'll meet again tomorrow morning. See if we can discover anything more about ourselves and about, I guess, the positive aspects or the positive ideas of libertarianism. Let's pray. Holy God, we thank you for your continued watch care over us. As we consider our wants, our needs, our humanity, as we consider your divinity, Show us how these should come into alignment. Your will merging with our will. Your desires merging with our desires. 2,000 years ago, you told us that you bring to your people a new law. This law we still struggle to understand. This law of love. In this passage that you gave to us, you try to explain what the law of love looks like. And when we hear what you want for us, we see that it touches our hearts. It meets our needs. Help us to embrace your love and your love. Be with us as we meditate on these things. In Jesus' name, may we make our lives of value. Amen.